the technology is here. This is Michelle, and I'm here with Dr. Ryce and Dale Hoffman for Aramaic Fridays. We welcome you to the show, and thanks for coming out to listen this holiday weekend. Today is August 29th, 2014. Our call-in number is 646-200-4169. Press 1, and that will put you into queue to talk with Michael and Dale. We encourage you to call in with comments and questions, allowing you to strengthen your practice of recovery. So, Michael, Dr. Tim, Dale, welcome.
Muchas gracias. Recovery, human recovery. Oh, it's interesting. We've just been talking in the Laws of Living class a little bit about the idea that virtually anyone who is born into this culture is suffering because of the way the birth process is done from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And, of course, that leads to a string of events in one's life where that tends to be reinforced until first century Aramaic forgiveness is introduced. And the forgiveness process is that process that takes us inside and shows us what underlies the output of our minds, and that when we're looking at the output of our minds, we're looking at the output of our minds. We've spent a lot of time in the Laws of Living intensive so far talking about the importance of perception based in truth and perception based in the active presence of love, which in Aramaic was called Rahma, a condition in the mind that guarantees the highest and best perception possible. And when we're resonated into some form of hostility or fear, that we tend to lose the capacity to bring that forward. And so our support is to bring that forward, to bring it forward in ourselves, to support that coming forward in each other, and really, truly understanding the way that this energetic universe called life operates and bringing it forward to every mind, heart, and being on the planet. And so we're just honored and delighted for everybody that chooses to play with us every day. And we'll start out by welcoming Dr. Tim and see if Dr. Tim has anything to share before we step into conversation with Dale. We had lots of comment, and yesterday's show was awesome. If you haven't listened to it, go back into the archives, give a listen to yesterday's show. And Dr. Tim, how do you be, sir? Are you with us?
Yeah, are you there?
I got you. I can hear you. Yes, sir.
All right. I was just saying it's a bit of a slower day, no patients today, and prep for the holiday and family time.
Yeah.
I just did a lot of processing last night after the call and went back and listened to Wednesday's and Thursday's call and kept the processing going, and then finally got to bed about midnight and woke feeling pretty darn good, all things considered.
Awesome. Anything
So I'm doing well.
Anything to share from that listening? Any new input?
Well, I think most of it was real clear in the processing. And it was real accurate how, when I went back and listened, I could tell just where I got triggered and just what the words were that resonated. And so it was all as we talked about it yesterday. There was a few little tears reminding or listening to the where I clicked in the idea that the key was the word fun. That'll be fun. That'll be exciting. And how every time in the past when I had revisited that beating, nothing about how they were laughing or thinking it was fun, nothing about that had ever come up before. So that was just another layer of the energy that I needed to dismantle, and that was the trigger for it. So,
and certainly anything but fun for you.
Yeah, and it continues, you frequently say, well, that'll be fun, and inside my head I'm saying, no, that's not going to be fun at all. And this is part of it, that the different times in my life where I have experienced sadness and fear and shame and physical pain, where others were thinking it was fun. And I still have layers of that to dismantle before I'm going to feel comfortable saying, yeah, let's go confront this person on that. Let's go have this conversation and see who's right and who's wrong. And that's never in my past experience has that done anything but make me want to run away. So, and I'm seeing more and more of the layers of where that comes from.
Awesome. Cool. Well, healing is always an exciting, fun process. And, of course, as we've said many times, not always doctors feel good. And I'd like to, and I just, if I'm a little breath, out of breath, I just ran up this and just finished our class. And so things are ongoing here at Heartland, which is intensive. So it's intense. We've had a very, very productive and moving morning, and so things are just rocking forward. But I would like to briefly share the worksheet, one of the worksheets that I did out of yesterday's show. And, of course, Dr. Kim, you got to be the object of attention. And being conscious and remembering to fill in the blanks between your name is the, or after your name is the object of attention, the reminder with my own initials that it's about me. And the reality was that as, for me, was that of being misinterpreted, which is an old issue for me. And the second part of it was seeing that presented as perhaps a fact, that my mind could see that there was an attempt to present that bullying thing as a fact. And so that was the misinterpretation for me. And the feeling that came up, and it was kind of interesting because I'm not sure this is a word that I've ever really used about my own feelings, but the feeling that I tapped into was that of trepidation. And the thought behind that feeling for me was, will other people buy that misinterpretation? So that was what my trepidation was about. So that was kind of the core of my worksheet, was cleaning up my mind's ability to produce trepidation when misinterpreted. And so I was quite conscious at the stage of the punishment, and as opposed to wanting to punish, it was just a focus on the choice to keep coming forward in the presence of that. For me, that's where when I got down to step 1E, was really looking at, and am I willing to keep coming forward as that presence of love in this circumstance? And when I ended up with two goals, or two different worksheets that I did specifically around that whole thing as number one. And one was, my goal for you, Tim, was to see me truly. And the second goal, the second worksheet that I did, was that the goal for you to heal any projection. And so as I moved through that and to cancel that goal to see me truly and to heal misperceptions, and inviting Ruka in, what that moved into for me was that my next worksheet was that this was, for me, an issue around Dad. And never being, when I was maybe 10 years into this work, 6 years into this work, something like that, I went back and in a breath session had a memory of remembering being, infant, small, and knowing exactly why I was here. And in that same experience, that same remembering, I touched into the fact that my dad came in to do the same thing, and that he didn't do what he came here to do, at least not in the form that he, at least in my perception, came to do it. He went into, just supporting his family and doing a job. And so when I came in with the clarity of what I was here to do, which I had as an infant, I remember having that, that sort of, at least my perception was that really freaked my dad out, and he just piled on the garbage, and not knowing any better, I bought into it. It took several years to start to get free of it, so I could see that this whole thing was about my opportunity to go to the next level of cleaning up my relationship with my dad and canceling my need for my dad to see me truly. And so that was pretty powerful. And then looking at 6C really tapped into, for me, times when I've compromised the truth of myself, when I've done things that are out of harmony with what I'm here to do, out of harmony with truth, and that's another worksheet place which I have not stepped into yet, but I have more work to do in that arena. And so the new commitment is to hold the space for the truth of me to show up and to keep bringing that forward and sharing it with you. And that was the core of the work that I've done so far around that issue. And I thank you for that opportunity to take all of that to the next level and the next layer.
Well, you're welcome. I thought a couple times of the Allen Hoffman. I don't remember exactly which lecture this comes from, but he talks about burning in the light. And there was certainly some of that Wednesday night and yesterday morning as I was getting in touch with that worksheet and thinking about, presenting it to you, presenting it on the show, and facing those old energies. So maybe Dale can launch in with something about that, the idea that we've been told about hellfire as something bad. And are you with us, Dale?
Yeah, I'm with you. And I had to write down a subject for a worksheet for myself because I didn't hear the last, and I'm just quietly over here in the background. I didn't hear the last couple days, and the first thing when y'all started talking, first of all, well, I had a thought first. I'm going to tell you the second thought first. The second thing was, wow, what an honor it is, and it's exciting to be a part of a process with people that are willing to wear it, and to do it right there in front of everyone rather than sort of putting a facade out front and hiding behind some sort of mask of perfection that, of course, it doesn't exist, but yet at the same time, that's what so many people will so easily buy into. And the worksheet subject for me was, wow, what was it? Wow, it was like immediate, it was kind of like standing around the water cooler at a job, and people have that certain energy, and you don't even have to hear what they're saying. You pick up the energy or you see the faces, and then immediately you hook. It hooks, and something starts resonating. So I immediately, instantaneously started writing the wow, what is it subject to delve into that, because this is not the only time that's come up for me. It's I used to say, it's because I grew up in New Jersey, but that's a bad excuse. I think so. I want to thank both of y'all for just being open in that. And I can actually, speaking of the fire and the light, I can feel a burning. I can feel a good effervescence right now. Actually, even just bringing that space out, the sort of gossip aspect of it.
Well, let me just, you bring up something very important, and since it's in the context of this show, I should say very briefly that what Michael and I were talking about was that yesterday I started the show by presenting a worksheet that I had done because I had been so triggered by Wednesday's show and some of the content that I was having difficulty breathing yesterday morning when I got up. And when I did the worksheet, I had a goal for Michael to be more loving and accepting of others, and canceled that goal and asked what would be the hidden part of my mind that was creating my pain, my fear. And I did a couple breaths, and I immediately felt like someone had punched me in the solar plexus. And that took me back to a memory of when I was beaten by bullies when I was 14 years old. And I had the wind knocked out of me so intensely that it was at least 20 minutes before I could catch my breath. People had to sit with me, move me to a different place, and I kept crying, but I couldn't cry well because if anybody's ever had their wind knocked out of them, I had that feeling. So yesterday morning doing the worksheet, that came back, and I had to sit in that energy and have the crying, but not be able to cry, have the pressure in my chest, but not be able to catch a breath. And one of the things that came in that breathing and the awareness of how vivid the memory came back with the physical sensation as though someone had just punched me in the solar plexus was the awareness that there was a key aspect of the interaction with Michael on Wednesday that tied into how the bullies were laughing and thinking it was fun to beat on me when I was 14. And even though I've done a lot of work around that bullying incident and that beating, it never came to my awareness before that I needed to dismantle the energy around people laughing at me when I was in pain. And so that was the worksheet, and then we just heard how, in response to that, Michael had his worksheet. So that there's a catch-up. And that's why I was saying to you, Dale, maybe you could talk more about that, how they've twisted the idea of hellfire out of the idea of standing in the light of truth.
You know, I had a really amazing experience this past Monday night in Ohio, in Strongsville, Ohio. I did a home gathering, which I've been doing a lot of home gatherings lately. They felt so intimate yet so incredibly rich and nuanced, and there's almost like an open family aspect to it, even though people that have never been there before show up. It just, there's a certain feeling. I think it's probably the cocoon I felt at Heartland that feels so natural in that open space. And we, throughout the day, I kept, actually previous days before that event, at my friends Corky and Barb's house. They have a business called Inner Harmony, and they do a lot with like Mary Magdalene energy and amazing friends. But the couple of days before that, I kept getting updates of how many people were coming. At first it was like 10, and then it was 12, and then it was like 15 and 20 and 25 and 30 and 32. And I'm like, how are we going to fit these people? And I'm like, well, just let go of that. We ended up having, I think, 32. But one of the things that we really got into, that I sort of got into right from the beginning, was saying that, you know, when, without going into a finger pointing, when you push certain things off the table and say, well, you know, that's not allowed here, that's not allowed in the discussion, you go stupid. You know, it's like having a bias that Michael talks so beautifully about. And what happened was, in a lot of so many cases, not in one particular time, not just at the Council of Nicaea, but over the course of hundreds and hundreds, and now at this point thousands of years, when you don't look at Eastern philosophies and you don't look at things, like as an example, when you don't allow the Gospel of Mary Magdalene into the Bible because of it's too Gnostic, it's too experiential, there's too much personal responsibility in it, or you don't allow the Gospel of Philip, you could argue that they're older or newer manuscripts, whatever, but you push out the Gospel of Mary Magdalene where she talks about the 7 human energy centers and what they look like when they're shut down, when they're not in movement. You don't allow that on the table, and you don't allow any kind of influence from any Eastern philosophy that would look Eastern. You can't talk about chakras or anything. And then here you are, you come upon in the stories of Mary with Yeshua, and it talks about, you know, her being the one that he cast out 7 demons of. And of course, there's nothing in the Aramaic or the Greek that says clearly demon. In Greek and in Aramaic, the word translated as demon in both cases just means spiritual energies. And really, on the deepest level, they mean spiritual energies that are either not moving properly, they're not given a voice, or they're somehow shut down. And that the word in Aramaic, apek, that was translated as cast out, means to stimulate the movement of something, exercising the movement, which is a pretty clear 7 chakra thing. And of course, later on, there was a little bit of an influence from, and I'm going to bring this into the fire and hell, there was a little bit of, all of a sudden, there's 7 deadly sins, and they started labeling. And if you actually do your research in the Bible and sources outside of the Bible, there's dozens of 7 deadly sins. And they kept changing over the course of hundreds of years. People would literally just make them up and what they thought the 7 deadly sins were, which is interesting, though, because it started with the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which, of course, was not allowed into the Bible. And she talks about the quality of the 7 chakras. And they didn't have a clue what they were looking at because they didn't allow that into the discussion or onto the table. Much like with the whole hell thing, what we think of as Gehenna, which if you look in the New International Version, it's just translated simply as hell. Gehenna was the city trash dump. So, okay, push that off the table. Let's not talk about it. And let's not look into the fact that in Yeshua's language, the word that was translated as fire, as in the supposed fire that would burn you, is nuhrata. And nuhra is a word that already means a reflective light, moonlight, a light that's not direct at you, but rather it could also be moonrise or even possibly sunrise. Sometimes nuhra is sometimes translated even as sunrise, that it's not a direct light, but it's actually a reflection before the sun comes above the horizon. And when you put a ta on the end, nuhra is already a feminine word, feminine gendered. When you put ta on the end, Michael could add into this, that ta is the feminine, it's the experiential, it's the attitude, it's the perception. You've got a word that's double feminine, which is not something that's normal in ancient Aramaic. It's actually very bizarre. It's sort of like me saying he's a man's man today, which isn't necessarily bizarre, but, when I hear man's man, I think chainsaws and football games and beer and stinky shirts or something, It's there to make a point. But that word translated as fire, by him double gendering that feminine, I really feel like it's a way of saying, look, guys, this is not some sort of fire that's going to burn you. And remember, he talked about heaven as a present moment right now experience that wasn't in any physical location. You can't get there by looking for it. And hell is exactly the same thing. It's a very present moment experience. It's not something that happens in the future. It happens right now when things are resonating and you're not willing to allow those to come up and feel. And in the light of that awareness, when you sort of catch yourself in the mirror and you realize, oh my God, this is really about me, all of a sudden your limbs go limp, your power points like your hips, your shoulders, your legs, your ankles, you feel like you want to drop down to the earth, and you start having that burning on the face and the burning on the neck, whether it's coming through as hostility or fear. And when those layers, the bushel baskets, burn off, it doesn't feel so good. And I do find it really empowering and incredible that even after all these years, when something pops up for me, just to know that I have a choice as to whether I'm just, most of my life, just remotely, or not so much remotely, but just completely unconsciously living with all this hostility and fear, not even knowing there was anything I could do about it. I was just a victim, and I love what actually Barbara Waterhouse often says, there's no victims, only volunteers. And it's a true thing. Just to have the choice to be able to say, hey, wait a second, this hurts. I don't like the way it feels. I've realized that there's pain, but yet I'm suffering. And suffering is a choice. And I've, up until I met Michael, I never knew there was an actual choice. I didn't have to feel this kind of stuff. And that burning off, that's the hellfire. And there is no future hell because there's only now. And I've got a few videos that go into it. I'm not sure which one it was you were speaking of. I know there's one called something about the cleansing of fire of the light versus hell, which I think was in Maryland, Frederick, Maryland. But then there's one of me at the Spiritual Living Center in Atlanta, and I'm mentioning it because I did talk about that, and I sort of caught flack for it afterward by some of the, I'll just say, the powers that be in the particular place that it was filmed, and I couldn't understand it because I got such a response from the people that were there and people sending messages over the next few weeks. But I was kind of tisk-tisked and tapped on my hand because I was talking about things like shadow, and I was talking about the things that are in the corners, rather than just saying, whatever, I'm perfect. I was actually saying, look at this, let's increase the light and look at anything that's unlike it, because the only reason there's any appearance of shadow is not because I don't somehow believe something hard enough, but rather because I'm believing that there's shadows and there's fear and there's hostility, and it's about taking the light into those spaces. And it's funny because there's certain places, and I know it happens with Michael too, the certain places, I say it with a smile on my face, there's certain places I don't get asked back to, because even though the community goes, oh my God, we need this so bad. We need to be able to go into these spaces. We need to be able to open the heart and to go in and bring the light in here. A lot of times, sometimes powers that be get a little freaked out by it because they somehow feel threatened, and they'll almost create any excuse to not bring you back. And it's not even about, this isn't so much about centers, it's about the human core. And it's that sort of same thing people have, that when something's happened, it's like, no, don't want to talk about it. I had it actually with Michael a couple of days ago where he started talking about self-publishing with me on the phone, and I was like so entrenched in, oh, no, I've already looked into self-publishing, not going to do it. And it was funny because I noticed myself and actually, did a worksheet, and it wasn't even actually about Michael. It was about self-publishing. Like, what is it about self-publishing? And it was funny, I brought up a thing that felt like, oh, well, self-publishing. Maybe there was somehow something in that. What it brought up for me was that there was some kind of, like I didn't, and I haven't really pulled that the root out completely yet. There was something in me that felt like, oh, well, I've been working so hard for so long, I just want to hand this off to someone else, and I'll do all the book tour, but let them do all the thought work and all of that kind of stuff. And I was like, well, that's an interesting thing, because it's happened with me quite a bit in my life where I get something right there to the 19th out of the 20th kilometer, and they go, oh, well, I've done my time. It's time to take a break now. I'll pull the plug out of the wall. Interesting thought. So it's been something I've been digging deeper into, and it sort of, Michael helped open the door again for me with self-publishing, and I realized that, and I had a fire experience. I had that. I realized that if through crowdfunding, which I'm sure a lot of people would support that, crowdfunding, get good artwork, put the thing out there, and just put it in people's hands. I was like, wow, I shut that door. And when Michael started to open it for me, I thought, oh, no, that door's shut, don't want to talk about it. Interesting. Much like anything that's resonating, when you don't want to look, it kind of, you can slam the door, or you can actually let the door open, and you can let the experience burn through. And I feel so much gratitude and honor to know that, and to be conscious enough, when the stress is up and the chips are down, that I know that I have that choice instead of just falling down into the abyss.
Well, Dale, when you put together, we're talking about going into certain centers and then the powers that be, and remember the basic principle that when I'm in blockage of truth and truth shows up, my stress goes up. Most people have their stress attached to getting rid of the source of the information. Don't make me look in here, rather than wiring it into self-correction, and that's the replacement is. So if I'm in that place of blocking truth and my stress is up, then I want to wire it back to self-creation. So that's, I think you just described it well with the whole issue of the self-publishing, but also the going into centers where you bring forward something, direct light that brings up people's shadow. And you sort of triggered some new brain cells for me as we were talking about the double feminine, and that all perception is reflected light. There's nothing direct about it. We think that we look out through our body's eye and we see what's out there. We never see what's out there through the so-called body's eye. We only see what's reflected off of our own brain cells, and that's reflected light. And the resistance is against bringing in the direct light, bringing it in clearly, truly, directly from the source. So for me, that's an interesting new piece of the puzzle, is that all perception is reflected light, reflecting off of my brain cells. My brain cells are in accuracy, that is, they are accurate, then I'll get accurate reflected light and have accurate direction toward what's going on in my world. But if the light for me is darkness, if the reflected light is darkness that is based in hostility or fear, then what kind of behaviors will I do to keep from facing the light directly? And the invitation of this work is to just keep heading toward the light. Just keep heading toward the direct experience of it, which when we correct what's going on in perception, the reflected light, we get to the point where now the light that comes from the mind supports us because it's now accurate about the actuality, supports us in stepping fully, totally into the real light, the real thing.
Wow.
So that's a new piece for me. Thank you. That double feminine was like, oh, click, there it is. That's what that's about. Perception's all just reflect.
Your choice of words there is perfect because, that's it's funny, and it just as many times as it's come through. You know, it's one of the greatest chestnuts. Is like, as an example, someone who maybe they've never even heard something that I've said, or maybe I referred them to one of your videos or your book or something, and they come back and they have a nuance. You know, they have a nuance that even me, having said something or having heard you say something 100 times, that I didn't quite catch. And it's so, and that's the thing too. I mean, if I'm not open in the moment to be open to that perception from another, then of course I've got no chance. Because, of course, it's much easier to see what's in somebody else than what's in me. So, a lot of times.
So that's the gift. That's the gift of the community of love. You know, in Aramaic, where they talk about the kingdom of heaven, in the Greek, as though it's some sort of an outward, you know, somewhere off in space, and you'll get there someday. Are you gonna go to heaven when you die? It's like, Yeshua says, hey, if somebody tells you it's over there, over there, over there, believe them not. It is here. It is within you. It is now. And it is now when we really, truly enter, and in Aramaic, that phrase, kingdom of heaven, is the community of love. And that, you know, to me, that's one of the beauties of this show and the communities that you're developing, that we're developing all over the globe, is people who can reflect back accurately and stand as the active presence of love with and for each other. And that's where we get all those nuances and the gifts we get from each other. It's just, you know, what an awesome, awesome gift.
Wow. It gets me thinking about how I've been, a lot of my work in the last 6 months since the book titled itself sort of in a dream, a lot of my work has been focusing on recognizing the echoes and the reverberations and the resonance and the reflections as just that. And I've been telling people that, you know, in most cases, the key is in the reflection or in the echo, that it's not necessarily when you're full blown in the middle of an experience and feeling overwhelmed. You know, of course, hindsight's always 20/20, and I tie the forgiveness work into it, saying, look, it's as much about the things that aren't quite so obvious, the things that are sort of bent around the corner and the little sort of quiet shadows and things like that. It's in that sort of sweet space, as an example, after toning, that I feel is where the sweetness comes from. It's like the intensity of the toning is there, or even the sweetness of the toning, but after you do like a great tone and it's very resonant, it kind of echoes and reverberates through the body, much like if you've got a great, beautiful, joyous experience, ecstasy, whatever it may be, it echoes, it keeps echoing for a while. Or if you've got one of those ones that feels awful and I feel like completely victimized and awful, I just didn't like it at all, and that reverberates. And it's like somehow it's happened, you know, it's kind of the focus of my book, how if we can, to be open and noticing the echoes that each action or choice creates in our lives, not sort of decisions that cut things apart from just junk that's already inside of us or somehow some kind of predetermined beliefs that we have that are already locked in there, but knowing that each present moment there's a conscious choice. There's a series, you know, science would say there's infinite numbers of dimensions in any present moment, and we are the sum total of all of these flickerings that are completely imperceptible to to the human eye that the flickers are so fast that we don't even realize we're popping between all these dimensions. There's infinite choice in every moment if we could just realize that and to be able to recognize that which is sort of lingering and echoing after, and notice that if it doesn't feel good, maybe we don't want it in us. Most people just don't get it. They don't understand that there's a choice there. You can remove that. No idea. They think that, and I'll say this too, I was listening to a thing from someone else that does forgiveness work that is, very much like Michael's work in some cases, word for word. But I noticed something that I thought, all right, hold on a second here. I went through this whole process, and there's something strangely missing. One was there was no identification of a goal, and number two, there was no cancellation. There was like letting off the hook. There was like a pardoning process, but there's no actual removal of the root because of course there's not even an identification of a goal. And I thought, wait a second, this is great, and I understand people cry, and I understand people feel better, but wait a second here. It's like the root of forgiveness, the actual forgiveness was not there. And I thought, wow. It's funny, too, because, some of it was word for word from your sheet. And it's like, it brought something up for me. And I thought, well, how can I express to people there's something that's not quite there, and also acknowledge the light of the one who's, taken this version out that kind of, for me, I think misses the essential core. How can I do that without seeming that I'm somehow, in some sort of heavy judgment or, I don't know, but it brought something up for me too. So I must say that, and I had a beautiful week. It was great, but I've done more worksheets this week, and I've got more in the fire than I have in quite a while, actually. But yep, it's been a beautiful week. So there you go. It's not because everything's falling apart and it's awful. It's just I've got the choice and I've got the tool.
Healing is always, always awesome. And I'm led to go back to you were speaking about the great tone. So maybe this would be a good space for you to just pick your favorite, latest and greatest tone and share it with us. Would that work?
Yeah, sure. Well, like sort of as a quick intro, I've been doing a lot, not just with sounds in terms of words, like Aramaic words, Hebrew, Sanskrit, even some Greek and Lakota, but I've also just been working with expressing and using sound as an expression, one of the things that I differentiate beforehand was a few things. One is that toning, like making a tone, is great. Allowing something to express, which is a different way of doing it rather than making a sound, but sort of connecting into whatever sound can come through in the moment, that's also great. But the thing that's very important to me, because I've been doing some gatherings based around this new idea of a primal voice, is that I'm letting people know this is not one of those primal scream things that happened in the 60s and 70s that is like almost like a victim mentality where it's like I'm expressing all this awful stuff through sound that happened to me, whether I'm aware of what it is or not, and that I'm constantly doing this over and over every day or weeks on end. And I'm telling people it's interesting how you can flip into victim mode even without expressing a word. You can flip into victim mode even in a sound. And I tell them that, sometimes those wail, that sort of primal wail can be something very valuable. I hear it in still point breathing quite a bit, where someone just locks into something. And it's the wailing, but it's understanding that there's a choice there in perception, and it's amazing how when we do flip into a victim mode, that everything immediately and instantaneously reflects victim back, and all of a sudden we start to fall backwards and we start to slide into the black hole. But a tone that's really done a lot for me for a long time, actually, is a simple sound. It's two letters. It's Resh Aleph, R-A, Ra. And Ra is a sound for light. And it's not simply just Aramaic. It's in Akkadian. It's in Phoenician. It's in Sumerian. It's in Egyptian, Coptic. It's in all these different languages, the Ra sound. And Ra is a sound that when I I find it so intriguing, speaking of that Michael was saying of direct versus reflected light. To me, Ra is such a beautiful expression of direct light. And one of the things that I often encourage or guide people to do when facilitating toning is I'm letting them know, look, this isn't really about feeling whatever this particular sound is supposed to make you feel. This is about being open, allowing the sound to come through so that we sort of move past toning it and it begins to tone us. And then we're open when we have that sort of open curiousness within the tone so that we're not looking for something from it. We're actually so completely open that we recognize the direct experience of the tone as it births through us. So before I do the tone, I wanted to say that it's not so much about finding or feeling a particular quality in it, but being open to the direct experience of the tone itself and letting go of any kind of need to define it in words. Because generally in toning, I'll often ask people, I'm asking you a rhetorical question. I'm asking how you feel, but I'm not looking for answers in words, okay? And then after the toning, I'll ask them, how do you feel? Just be open. I'm not asking them to form thoughts so much as to just tune into the temple, to the body temple. So I can make a sound. I'll make the Ra sound just once, and all you need to do in listening to it is just be open. And the one last piece is that the sound that lights me up, that's resonant for me, people can say A440 is a magic tone or whatever. I don't really believe in toning for a human being that there's a magic tone that we should hit. What I believe, and what I've actually seen directly and experientially, is that the tone that would make James Earl Jones light up is not going to be the same tone that's resonant that would make Celine Dion light up. Hers would obviously be much higher. Early in the morning, it's going to be lower than late at night, where it's going to be higher because we've been talking for a while. So what I'll generally do before I tone is I'll kind of tune around a little bit to see what I can feel. And you can start low and can move up a little. When I find the resonance, I stay with that tone for a while. So I feel the pop. You'll feel it because your body will light up. And what's interesting in toning is that you'll notice a little bit of a wobble. And if you start to judge that as somehow needing to be cleaned up, it wobbles more. But when you can just let go and be open in the tone itself, then the wobble goes away. So I'm going to move it up a little bit again. Now that's completely lit me up. That's the Ra. That, as an example, is at the beginning of Rahma, which, of course, is love, friend, that indefinable, the Ra is the shining forth of heat and light, of presence, of awareness, of consciousness. The Hum sound in the middle means the center of the being or the center of the body. It also means womb. And then the Ma sound at the end is that sound for a birthing, the birthing or a mother. Ma is the sound that's most often uttered by children in relation to the maternal figure in their life, whether it's in their language or not. More than any other sound, children just naturally look at the mother, and the first sound that they do in relation to her is Ma, even if it's not in their language. So Rahma, or just simply the Ra, is such a powerful sound. And Rama not only is powerful in Aramaic, but in Sanskrit, Rama is the primary word for one who has ascended, which we would call in the West often called Lord. It's amazing. See, I'm in a completely different state of being now, just from one sound.
Well, that's delightful, and I appreciate the input on how to find the right tone.
Yeah, it's a common and very understandable question. People will often ask me, is there a specific sound, and if there is, how do I know it? And if I don't know it, how do I find it? So, yeah.
And let's tie in with Nura, raw sound.
Absolutely.
Rachma. When you get back to Yeshua and they ask him, all this stuff you're teaching us, tell me where to start. What's most important? What does he say? Rachma. You got to activate and bring into play that filter in the frontal lobes of your brain that's the gateway for human life. So powerful to go there while the mind's trying to figure something out.
And I will
Being
also say,
transformed, and healing happens. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that when I do the raw sound, that's what lights up. It's the frontal lobes and the pineal gland, right around the third eye, just pops. It pops, and you can actually feel it open. Whether someone wants to believe it or not, it's there. It's pretty profound.
Well, it's interesting when we touched into a community out in California that are Native American speakers, and we asked them, we had discovered actually in the classroom here at Heartland, Dan and I working over the years and came up with this. Rachma was this filter in the frontal lobes of the brain. And when we talked to these folks out in California that were Native Aramaic speakers, their take was that they had lost the definition of that word Rachma in their culture, but the tradition, they weren't sure what it meant, but the tradition said that it was the most precious jewel that you could possess.
Yeah, and I would say it's definitely beyond definition. I mean, I can break down the sounds like that, but that's not it. That's just a finger pointing at the moon. It's in the direct experience itself, absolutely.
And one of the things that we're talking about and addressing here in Laws of Living, where we're heading, is to make that condition permanently active in the mind is such an amazing, amazing space to come from. Permanent condition. So we're down to about 12 minutes. Let's just check in with Michelle and see if there's any conversation happening in the chat room that we should be aware of, or anybody with a hand up in the phone. Michelle?
Hi. Well, chat room is busy. Peace and I are talking about aspects of being heart-centered and such, and bullying and just random variety. But before I even dialed in, or you dialed in, or anyone else today, Mark Haddis was on the switchboard with his hand up, and so I think he really wants to share today. How you doing, Mark?
Hey, how are you, Michelle? Hey, gang, that was awesome. Dale, when you did the raw, my whole body lit up, and this big, huge smile went across my face. So whatever that was, I want more of it.
Beautiful. Try it. Just do it. It works. It works. And it goes so far, beyond definition. You feel it.
Is that on one of your CDs? I've got all your CDs.
Yeah, it's all over a bunch of them. The raw sound is on a bunch. That's the basis of my first book, is not necessarily just toning, but being aware of the vibrations, and like as an example in the forgiveness process, the sort of the reverberation and the echoes, but it's probably on a bunch of my YouTube stuff too. Videos. I think I do on there a bit.
Well, awesome. Thank you.
Also be aware. Hold on for just a second, Mark. Also be aware that the instrument that will most powerfully tune your Rothma filter and turn it on is your instrument. You know, the world teaches us to look outside of ourselves. And Dale, you as you're teaching, we're working to provide an opening. Yeshua, says of himself, he says, deny me. It doesn't matter. That's not where the key is. He says, don't deny the one that sent me, which is within you. And so your voice, your frequency with that tone is what will most powerfully turn your Rothma center on.
Yeah, for me, it's been song. I've been turning to song and strengthening my instrument, and it's been really extraordinary. And especially when no one's home, when I have the privacy, I've been able to really belt out some tunes. And it's fun because it's kind of a way for me to both process and intone what my body needs and what's been awakening in me. So it is absolutely perfect that you just said that, Michael, because I was about to go get Dale's stuff. I'm like, I got to learn all these intonations, but I'm doing the intonation the way I'm doing it, the way my body is wired to receive it.
And it's not so important what the sound is. What's important is that you're open in it, and the state of presence, that you're 100% fully, wholly open and allowing the sound to come through. I always say that the sound is secondary. And, yeah, exactly what Michael said. It's about you doing it. That's the key.
And remember, there were two comings of the Christ. The first one was external. And so, yes, go get his stuff, because the nuances that will become apparent will gift you with, the frequencies, the work that he's done will open the space for you to move to there and still higher. And that's where the second coming comes. And you notice the second coming of the Christ was the personal one. It's where that aspect of yourself opens in you. So we're here, and that's, to me, the power of community. We're here to support, to inspire each other. And, each nuance that anyone brings. We were in class this morning, and one of the women in the class, and she may choose to put her hand up and say a word or two about it, but one of the women in the class was processing an issue and around her dad, and in great resistance to looking at that issue, just wanting to, from the mind say, well, but this, and this, and open to a different energy process. And as she opened the space for the active presence of Dad's love, and Dad's no longer in his body, to happen, she was sitting on one side of the room, and everybody in the room physically felt that energy enter the room. Everybody in the room was touched by her willingness to step into the receptivity of the active presence of her Father's presence and love. And I think our birthright is to receive the nutrient. I believe that the active presence of love that is brought to us by each person in our lives is a nutrient that supports and nurtures us in flowering and developing as who we are. And so that's, to me, the gift of community, that we can provide that space and that support for each other. It's awesome.
Well, could I process something real quick and just belt out a real quick tune and see if I can do it in public?
Go for it.
All right. Here it goes. Ale, ale, alleluia. Ale, ale, alleluia. Ale, ale, alleluia. 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 Thanks.
Thank you for your willingness.
That was really freeing. I appreciate you offering me the space to do that. Thank you.
Well, that's it. It's in the expression. That's, that's the key of forgiveness, for me, is removing those barriers or bushel baskets, those veils to the expression of our true light. And that's why I'm here, definitely.
Cool. Well, thanks. I'll hang up in case there's another caller. I appreciate you both, and thanks for the call and everything today. Appreciate it. Thanks for the intonation.
Thanks. So, Michelle, we're down to about 4 minutes. Anything else happening in the chat room? Anybody else with a hand up?
No, we're okay on the switchboard, and chat room's just humming along. Oh, wait, Rex can't. Rex, hi there, buddy. Can't have a show without hearing from you. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. Great program, Dale, Tim, and Michael, and everyone. It's just awesome to hear everything being shared. I was commenting on the lady also, Michael, that you were bringing up in our group today. And my experience was a little different than Michael's, but very similar. I had an experience of as soon as she tapped into that love and just so eloquently just breathed and released and brought up a really big piece and just breathed and let it go and very little struggle, and all of a sudden I saw and felt a wave of energy coming through, coming from her heart, and just a wave all the way around her, and it just circumnavigated the entire room, and I just felt it just through my whole body. And Michael acknowledged he got shivers, and it was just really powerful. And the reason I thought I'd mention it again is because it's what we do when we presence love in our heart. And it's in our bodies and our minds. It's so important. And that's why Rachma was spoke of in the first law. And that was the piece I really wanted to share, is just to reinforce it in us that it does have a massive effect, and it's tangible, it's real, and it's an incredibly practical expression of support and healing for everyone on the planet.
Beautiful.
Yay.
That was it. Thank you.
Any last thoughts, Dale?
Not necessarily. I do have like a couple events coming up actually in Asheville. I'm doing a still point tonight, a single session, which I've been doing some occasionally like on evenings and things for like smaller groups of people. I've got one of those tonight, and then I've got a toning thing I'm doing in Asheville tomorrow. Then I'm back out on the road in Georgia and Illinois, and just check out my website, DaleAllenHoffman.com. Everything's on there. I'm excited. I feel like I'm 7 or 8 years old again, excited with everything. I've been so awake and alive lately. Yet, if I didn't have these tools, it would probably have been the worst week of my life. But yet, when you have it and you can do the work right then and there, and you realize you have a choice in it, it changes everything, because it takes all that energy that would have probably broken me down, and it turns it into like a new release or a new paradigm. It's just an awesome way to live.
Cool. Awesome to know what Yeshua meant by be as a little child. And so we appreciate everybody being with us, and each day that you come and play with us. And on Monday we've got Parent-Teacher Talk Mondays, and so we invite you to bring a stranger to the show with you then. We're completing our Laws of Living Intensive here. It'll be over next Saturday, and then by Wednesday or Thursday we'll be on the road to St. Louis. If you're in St. Louis, come and join us there. And you're going to be in Atlanta, Dale?
I don't think so. I don't think I've got. No, I'll be in Blairsville. I'll be in Blairsville, like right on the border of North Carolina.
Right. Okay, cool.
In the mountains.
Awesome. So check Dale's schedule, and we'll be on up to play with Dr. Tim in the Chicago area, out near Woodstock, and then down into North Carolina, into Lansing, Grand Rapids, Michigan. We've got a 9-day intensive opening up the last day of October, if you're ready to take things to the next level. And then we've got a couple of intensives in Florida. Check out the schedule. Bring a stranger to the show on Monday. And